Hello, welcome to Northumberland Local Planning Committee. First of all, we'll start off with the procedures to be followed, and we begin with apologies. Do we have any apologies?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillors Bridget, Castle and Mather.
Thank you. Next is disclosure of members' interests. Councillor Hunter.
Just for the records, number 9, which is to do with Beadnell and Beadnell Parish Council Clerk. I have had no input into this or part of the determination, just for the records, so that I've not got an interest.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
I declare an interest in item number 6 and 7, the Duchess High School Annex, a variation of the conditions. It's a Northumberland Estate Plan application, and I'll be declaring a personal interest, not taking part.
In that case, could you leave the room at the relevant point? And Councillor Watson.
Yeah, on item number 10, tree preservation order. I'm told I don't need to leave the room because actually the reason I'm doing that is because I actually applied for the tree preservation order in the first place. So that's probably better if I don't take part.
Thank you. Next, we go on to the minutes of the previous meeting, pages 3 to 10.
Move acceptance, Chair.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Hell. Determination of planning applications. So before we start, we'll go through the procedure that will be followed. So there'll be an introduction by myself, an update from the planning officer, then there will be public speaking, which is 5 minutes for supporters, local parish council and objectors. There will then be questions to the officers from committee members, and then we go through to debate and move on to the resolution of the planning application. So the first planning application that we have, we're going to have one presentation covering 2 items. That's item 6 and 7 on your agenda. So it's application 21-03038, variation of conditions, and 21-03039, variation of conditions. And in this case, there will be an allowance of 10 minutes following the presentation for speakers, public speakers. Thank you. Can we now have an update from the officers?
Thank you and good afternoon, members. Prior to commencing the presentation, I would like to give an update on the Northumberland local plan. So the independent examination of the NLP has concluded. The inspector considers that, subject to a number of recommended main modifications, the NLP is sound and provides an appropriate basis for the planning of the county. The plan is in the final stage of preparation. There are no unresolved objections and the plan is consistent with national policy. Therefore, significant weight can be given to the policies of the Northumberland local plan. So before the committee today, there is a dual submission seeking to vary the approved plans for the redevelopment of the former Duchess High School building in Alnwick. The presentation will cover both applications given their similarities. So 21-03038/Verico seeks to vary condition 2 for the minor change of design of windows for a new built hotel and alter the treatment of the existing windows on the original buildings as approved under reference 20/01238/FUL. The associated application is 21-03039 Verico, and this seeks to cover the same changes under the associated listed building consent reference 20/01239/LBC. Further minor changes include an alteration to the internal road layout. However, the principal thrust of this application is a proposed replacement of the existing windows in the Grade 2 style listed building. All other elements are considered acceptable by officers. Before proceeding further with the representation, I would like to make a point of clarification with reference to pages 20 and 32, paragraph 7.5 on each in your agenda packs. This paragraph reads, "The principle of replacing historic windows is accepted where it can be demonstrated there is some benefit to the building for doing so." I would like to clarify that although the Act itself provides general support in principle for sustainable development, it must be said that the loss of historic windows in a listed building and replacement with modern replicas, and as with all applications, is assessed on a case-by-case basis to evaluate whether removing the windows would be harmful to the building's significance. Any harm must be supported by clear and convincing justification and weighed against any public benefits of the proposal, as per the National Planning Policy Framework, paragraphs 200 to 202.
Chairman, sorry to interrupt. I've noticed Councillor Patterson has just come in. Would it be possible just to recap on that little bit of introduction so that she is able to take part in our meeting?
I think, Chair, just start again, if you're happy to do that.
Yeah, I think on this occasion, if we could just run through again for clarification.
Chair, the A1 is straight up to
Yeah.
where there's a huge jam and I have to cross over to 697.
Yeah, we've had to follow the same diversions to get here, so if we can just run through the officer's report again, and we'll take it from the beginning. Thank you.
No, thank you, Chair. No problem. So I'll just repeat exactly what I've just said. So the independent examination of the Northumberland local plan has concluded. The inspector considers that, subject to a number of recommended main modifications, the Northumberland local plan, or NLP, is sound and provides an appropriate basis for the planning of the county. The plan is in the final stage of preparation. There are no unresolved objections and the plan is consistent with national policy. Therefore, significant weight can be given to the policies of the NLP. Officers have assessed the proposal against the policies of the local plan and can confirm that the change in weight of the plan will not result in a change to the recommendation. So, before the committee today, there is a dual submission seeking to vary the approved plans for the redevelopment of the former Duchess High School building in Alnwick. The presentation will cover both applications given their similarities. These are 21/03038/Verico. This seeks to vary condition 2 of the minor change of design of windows of a new build hotel, and also the treatment of the existing windows in the original building as approved under reference 20/01238 Application 21/03039/Verico seeks to cover these same changes under the associated listed building consent reference 20/01239/LBC. Further minor changes include an alteration to the internal road layout. The principal thrust of this application is the proposed replacement of the existing windows in the Grade 2 style listed building. All other elements are considered acceptable by officers. Before proceeding with the presentation, I would like to make a point of clarification with reference to pages 20 and 32, paragraph 7.5 on each in your agenda packs. Paragraph 7.5 reads, "The principle of replacing historic windows is accepted where it can be demonstrated there is some benefit to the building for doing so." I would like to clarify that although the Act provides general support in principle for sustainable development, it must be said that the loss of historic windows in a listed building and replacement with modern replicas, and as with all applications, is assessed on a case-by-case basis to evaluate whether removing the windows would be harmful to the building's significance. Any harm must be supported by clear and convincing justification and weighed against any public benefits of the proposal, as per National Planning Policy Framework, paragraphs 200 to 202. So moving on with the presentation, we have some location plans so members can familiarise themselves with the site orientation. So the site to which the applications relate is located on Bailiff Gate in Alnwick and on land immediately to the north. The listed buildings 2, 4 and 6 to 8 Bailiff Gate formerly housed the Duchess School. The site is situated on the outskirts of Alnwick Town Centre, sits within the conservation area and immediately to the west of Alnwick Castle. The site is accessed via the public road on Bailiff Gate. The north of the site is accessed via a private single carriage road accessed off the Peth. The existing access road tracks to the north and then forms a gravel track towards the west, providing some access to the rear of St Michael's Church. So the pointer on the handheld device doesn't work with this particular screen, but the road that leads along the eastern edge of the red line boundary, that's the PEF, and the buildings in particular subject of the replacement windows are those on the southern section, which sort of juts out on the red line boundary on that plan to the right. So moving on to the existing site plan. So the terraced buildings on Bailiff Gate sit at the top of the slope, which forms the PEF. The site slopes gradually down to Walker Gate to the north. It is bounded to the east by an existing retaining wall alongside the PEF. The west, a series of existing stone walls forming the boundary with St Michael's Church, that is, and to the north, Walker Gate forms a boundary with a stone retaining wall alongside the road. Now, to the east of this, you would have the to the east, of this site is the castle, just to give members some orientation who perhaps aren't familiar with Alnwick itself. The proposed site plan, important to note, this has already been approved under those previous references I mentioned. So the original permission to which this application relates is for the conversion of numbers 2 to 8 Bailiff Gate to form 14 hotel suites/apartments, including a new restaurant and bar area. It is proposed that this will be connected by a glazed link to a new build hotel block extension to the rear, providing a further 33 hotel rooms. This would equate to 47 in total. The original permission stated that the existing windows would be retained, and this application seeks to vary this requirement to allow a full replacement of the original single glazed windows with double glazed timber frame slimline cylinder glass units. The modern section is proposed to install aluminium framed windows. The issue here is whether it is appropriate to replace the existing single glazed windows in a Grade 2 star listed property. The window details on the new extension are acceptable. So I now have a series of slides. These are the proposed elevations, and members may have seen, well, they may have seen these before, given they're the same bar the window detailing as previously approved. So these are the proposed elevations on Bailiff Gate. These are the Grade 2 star listed buildings sitting in a terrace. Originally, the applicant stated that the windows would be refurbished and retained. However, we are led to understand, and perhaps anecdotally, that some of the windows are suffering from rot. This does not demonstrate they're incapable of repair. These doors, the doors you can see along the front there, the doors for each building, to be stripped and repaired. The windows you can see would be replaced with conservation-style double glazing. The applicant is proposing cylinder glass. These windows are thought to be the original windows which used crown glass. So this shows the new build modern element. Materials are natural slate and zinc to the roofs with sandstone walls. This shows the rear of the listed buildings actually. So the greyed out elements, that's the back of the listed buildings. Details include repair and maintenance of stonework and replacement of windows. This is to the east. As you would to give a further orientation, so this would be standing on the pend. So you can see the site, the levels slope down, the dark grey at the bottom of the screen slopes down. So you're standing on the PEF and the castle would be to your rear. Again, you can see that the existing listed element, the building on the left, those windows would be replaced. And just for completeness, southern elevation, material sandstone zinc, slate with a glazed link. And finally, again, just for the sake of completeness, west elevation showing modern extension. Again, it's previously been approved, but I enclose it for the sake of completeness to give members an overall feeling of the wider development proposal. So now some site photographs. Some site photos. Firstly, my apologies for limited photographs, but I understand members have had sight of a video with commentary. So this is the rear and side of the original building. Works have already commenced. The developer is implementing the current permission. You can see the original windows, some of which are boarded up due to damage. So this is the front. I'm afraid it's a stock image because when I went to take photographs, there were basically a compound right in front of them. So it wasn't going to give members a particularly clear impression of the buildings themselves. So I've lifted this one because it will give you a much clearer impression of the buildings themselves. So the front elevation, and you can see the traditional elements, materials, a range of window styles across the 3 blocks. The proposal seeks to replace the existing single glazed windows with slimline double glazed units in timber frames using cylinder glass. Planning policy, NPPF and Historic England advice offers that works to listed buildings should seek to reduce the potential harm from development. In the first instance, applicants should demonstrate that the existing windows are beyond reasonable repair. Only thereafter can the planning authority proceed to consider replacement units. The Council's Building Conservation team has commented that the proposals have the potential for less than substantial harm, as per the wording of the NPPF. This means that the proposal will still harm the character of the building, but there should be some positive reason for doing so. In this instance, the applicant has not demonstrated that they have explored all potential options for doing so. The applicant has not explored that there is a positive reason for replacing the windows. In this instance, the applicant has cited thermal and acoustic performance. However, advice from Historic England is that single glazed units with a secondary system, such as shutters or curtains, can actually outperform double glazed units. Considering this, the application is not consistent with NPPF policy BE3 of the ANNC district-wide local plan, the ANNC neighbourhood plan, or policy ENV7 of the emerging Northumberland local plan. The officer recommendation is that this application should be refused. Permission subject to the reasons cited in paragraphs 9.2 on pages 25 and 37 of your agenda packs. Thank you. And I appreciate Ms Rosalind Kane from Conservation has just come in. I would normally hand over to Ms Kane at this time, but I do appreciate that you've just walked in. Please, if you're ready to start, Rosalind, please do.
Okay. Thank you, David, and apologies for being late. I just want to say a few things about the significance of the building, especially the Grade 2 star listed building, which is on the corner of Bailiff Gate and the Peth. It's a very considerable, elegant, classical building that is 225 years old, we understand. It was built by the Northumberland Estate for their land agent. Hence, it's really quite a grand property, and it's got the classical fenestration pattern, which is very much part of its significance. The windows, we think, not all of them, but the majority of them, are the original Georgian sliding sash windows. They've got a lamb's tongue profile to the glazing bars, very thin glazing bars, and potentially there's some of the original glass left in some of the windows. So the windows themselves actually have historic interest and architectural interest and are of significance. Hence, our advice would be that they should be retained and repaired as far as possible.
Thank you. We now go to public speakers, and we have one public speaker who's speaking in support of the application, and that's Mr. Guy Munden. You have 10 minutes, or up to 10 minutes, you don't need to use all the 10 minutes, to state your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm speaking on behalf of Thunderland Estates as the applicant. The original planning application for this development was submitted in April 2020 and approved a year later in April 2021. Since that time, work has started on site, and it isn't unusual for planning permissions to need varying to reflect detailed design and to adapt to changing circumstances on site. This application is to vary certain elements of the approved plans, including a change to the window profile of the new hotel, a change to the internal alignment of the road, and to update the strategy towards the windows of the existing buildings that are being converted. And it's this last item that hasn't been accepted by the officers and why this is in front of committee. When the original scheme was designed over 2 years ago, it was intended to repair the existing windows where possible. When previously used as a school, the building had lacked proper maintenance, and time has passed since then, and the building is now in urgent need of repair, with many of the windows having been vandalised, and more significantly, dry rot has spread considerably. This has meant that the windows have moved from a position where some repairs were possible to instead needing full replacement. And the longer that this delay goes on, the worse the windows will become and the more impossible making repairs rather than full replacement becomes. The Planning Officer's report implies that the main reason for seeking to replace the windows is an economic one, that it's not cost efficient to repair the existing windows. The report says that the initial test is whether the existing windows can be repaired, and if so, can it be done reasonably. It is not the case that replacement rather than repair is being proposed because of the cost. The windows are simply beyond repair. The dry rot has spread to the original window frames, and it's not possible to repair them at any cost. It's not an economic reason for replacing the windows. It's the only practical option to preserve the building. The replacement therefore meets the Planning Officer's test that the existing windows cannot be repaired, as well as meeting Historic England's principle that replacing windows is acceptable where there is a benefit to the building. In this case, the benefit of doing so is that this important building will be restored and be able to be brought back into habitable use to the benefit of the town. It should be noted that Northumberland Estates are custodians of many listed buildings, and we are fully committed to their sustainable preservation and long-term maintenance. And these buildings at Bailiff Gate are adjacent to the estate's heart at Alnwick Castle. And if it was felt that the replacement of these windows would in any way harm the historic fabric of the buildings, we wouldn't be advocating it. However, the replacement doesn't harm the buildings at all. Let me be clear what replacement involves. It's a replacement of the window frame with a like-for-like, handmade timber frame that exactly replicates the original frame's dimensions. The new frame would be fitted with conservation slimline double glazing to replicate the exact form of the historic windows, and the new glazing would be cylinder glass to replicate the reflective quality of the historic glass. There'd be absolutely no difference in appearance between the existing windows and the replacement windows. Even the conservation officer has said that replacing the traditional windows with good copies would retain its aesthetic significance. This really does bring into the question, what are we trying to achieve here? It's accepted that the replacement windows are an exact copy of the original windows and will have the same appearance and same level of visual appreciation. The only issue seems to be that the conservation officer will know that they are not the original windows. Are we supposed to preserve the building so that only conservation experts know that the windows are original? Or should we be conserving the building for the appreciation of the public, who will see no difference as they walk past, while also achieving the benefits of replacing the windows with those of the highest quality and most sustainable design? Historic England have been consulted and they have no comment. In fact, in their response, they don't even deem this to be a material change to the approved planning consent. The Conservation Officer suggests that a better approach would be to install secondary glazing on the inside of the existing windows, rather than replace the windows with slimline double glazing. We're not proposing this because secondary glazing causes greater harm to the internal appreciation of the building, rather than the simple approach of slimline double glazing that fits with the proportions of the historic window frames. We have a responsibility to conserve the inside of the listed building as well as the outside. And in any case, fitting secondary glazing is simply not an option because the original window frames themselves have deteriorated so much with dry rot that they also need replacement. The option of replacing the original frames with new single glazing and then adding additional secondary glazing inside would be more damaging than simply just installing the slimline double glazing. The County Council has declared a climate emergency. This won't be taken seriously and it lacks credibility if it doesn't carry material weight in planning decisions. We are proposing replacement of single glazing with double glazing. This will hugely improve the thermal efficiency of the existing building, incorporating climate change resilience to the very fabric of the structure. This is a huge consideration and should carry significant weight in the planning balance alongside conservation interests, especially in this instance where it is already recognised that there will be no difference in external and internal appearance between existing and proposed replacement windows. The Planning Officer's report has fundamentally misapplied the test of the NPPF when assessing heritage harm. In regard to the original planning application, the Conservation Officer concluded that the heritage harm was less than substantial. This meant that the Planning Officer at the time balanced the heritage harm against the overall benefits of the proposal. The benefits include bringing back into use a vacant listed building, making optimum use of a brownfield site, providing high quality year-round tourism, an investment of around £11 million in the local economy, creation of numerous jobs, £500,000 per annum in gross value added to the local economy, and £100,000 per annum in business rates. It should be noted that when assessing these proposed changes to the approved plans, the Conservation Officer concludes the same level of heritage harm, i.e. less than substantial. The changes to the windows have not increased that level of harm. Therefore, the planning test under the NPPF is exactly the same as before. Do the public benefits outweigh the heritage harm? It's not the case, as the Planning Officer has done here, that the proposed changes to the replacement windows are taken in isolation and not balanced against the overall package of benefits. We don't see how the Council can change its position to now conclude that those same public benefits don't outweigh the same degree of harm. There will be a fundamental lack of consistency in decision-making if this application were refused, when the level of harm is no different when balanced against the same package of benefits. I would urge you to apply the same standards in decision-making as when the original application was approved, and not cause this important development for ANIC to install any longer. The consequence of delaying will cause the windows and indeed the wider building to further deteriorate, as well as delaying those wider public benefits of the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. We now have members' questions to the officers. At this stage, could I say, unfortunately, Councillor Swinburne, you came in late on the presentation and will not be able to take part in this debate on these two items on the agenda. And for everyone else, could you keep your hands raised until I've notified that I've seen you? Thank you. Councillor Hell.
Thank you very much. Can I ask, and it's really good to see the Conservation Officer here, on the specific point of what the Speaker said in favour of the application, that basically a layperson looking at the windows wouldn't notice the difference, it's only a conservation expert. That was the, charge is the wrong word, but that was the suggestion. What would you say in response to that?
I would say that you could apply that to all sorts of things. That part of the historic interest of this building is that the windows are 225 years old, potentially. So it might only be the Conservation Officer that would be able to tell the aesthetic difference. But surely we should be endeavouring to retain everything of that building that's got historic interest. Because you could almost say about any, you could say...
Can I just say, I'm kind of with you, but I'm just interested to reaffirm where my mind's going from what has been said, so that I'm kind of with you on this.
So I just, we could say we could replace anything, any of the fabrics, so you could replace the roof with the same type of roof tiles, but they wouldn't be the original roof tiles which had the historic interest, which have been there for 225 years.
Councillor Seymour.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a couple of things. I know this area quite well, and it's in a conservation area, I'm pretty sure, next to the castle and next to a lot of listed buildings, I would think. I'm just wondering if this building has shutters because on the inside, because a lot of listed buildings do. Which means that actually, you know, the need for double glazing in every building is not necessary because shutters really do help. So I'm just wondering whether it does.
Yes, it does. It has a lot of shutters, original shutters that are inside the building. I don't know if they currently open and close, but they are there as far as I'm aware. And you are absolutely right. So when the building was constructed, the shutters were put in for the very reason to stop heat escaping and to provide for thermal comfort. And their function will still be to do that if they're repaired.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Watson.
Beyond reasonable repair. Has that been demonstrated to you, and do you agree that they are?
Well, my colleague has been inside the building a few times in the last few months, and he did acknowledge that during the first application, some of the windows on the rear elevation were showing signs of dry rot, but he has been in this building the last 6 months and he doesn't agree with the conclusions of the window schedule that says they're now all subject to dry rot. So he doesn't actually agree that they are beyond repair.
So you disagree with the applicant?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Thorne.
Yes, obviously this is a building that's seen many uses, Conservation Officer. Obviously it was someone's house initially. We had it as a school annex for the Duchess School, and now it's to be a hotel. You know, I'm just looking at the new use, which obviously is going to preserve and take this building forward. And I'm thinking about the thermal and the acoustic benefits of double glazing to a hotelier. And, you know, I'm just wondering, are you taking them into consideration in your assessment?
What we do is we follow the guidance provided by Historic England, and they do have a very thorough document on thermal upgrading. And what they actually say is that you should approach it as a whole building approach and not just focus on the windows. So there's various methods that you can look at to try and improve the energy efficiency of the building as a whole. That's so loft insulation, draft proofing. Just alone draft proofing of windows can actually reduce heat loss and drafts by 80%. So that's alterations that can be done to the existing windows, and also looking at efficiency of heating systems. So basically striking a balance between energy conservation and building conservation. So we feel that in this instance, if the windows were repaired and the shutters were repaired and also secondary glazing was used, now I do note the comments about secondary glazing, that's not what the applicant prefers, but if you combine those three methods, the repair, the secondary glazing and the shutters, you actually get better reduction of heat loss than actually putting the new windows in. Because when you put the new windows in, you still have the issue of thermal bridging, whereas secondary glazing addresses thermal bridging. Also secondary glazing, there's different methods of it, and you can actually have secondary glazing panels that you can remove, which would allow for them to be used during the autumn and the winter, but not necessarily in the spring and the summer when they're not needed.
Thank you.
Councillor Hunter Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just curious as to why there's been no comment from Historic England since we're following their guidance.
I can't really answer that question. They haven't said they don't object, they haven't said they support it, they've just said that they refer to the council's in-house conservation team.
They've never commented. Very rarely.
Any other questions from the floor? Councillor Hell.
I was going to move to proposal at that stage. I think I might ask for a proposal.
Right. But you can make a proposal, but in this case, we are taking two votes. So your proposal would be on the first application, which is Verico 21033038, variation of conditions. So on that, do you have a proposal?
Yes, I do. So this is item 6 you're talking about.
Correct.
I would like to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation to refuse. If that's seconded, I'll make a speech. Thank you for seconding that. And the reason's quite simple. I think, I mean, it's really refreshing to have the Conservation Officer here and to stand up for these vitally important principles. And I've been at talks and presentations, and I know it's quite easy to think it's just windows, you know, it's just windows, it's glass or whatever. But actually, when you have it really explained to you, the significance of the conservation and aesthetics and keeping these historic, it really is important. So therefore, I would back the officers and recommend we support their decision to refuse.
Thank you. I have a proposal and I have a second there. Councillor Thorne, I'll allow you to make a comment or a summary.
Yes, Chair. Well, I would like to speak against the proposal. And, you know, I do so with a heavy heart. You know, I'm looking at this building in the round. It's a very special building. It's Grade 2 listed. I live in a listed property myself. I don't take these issues lightly. But, you know, I'm asking myself, what do we want from a window? And this is what the whole application is about. We want light. We want it to conserve heat. We want it to avoid drafts. We don't want it to produce any condensation. We want it to often restrict noise coming into the building. And again, we want it to keep the building clean. We do. And my line is that while the original glazing would assist in some of those things, it doesn't assist in a lot. Yes, the light comes through, but you know, the new secondary glazing units would improve the heat dramatically. They would also assist in eliminating drafts. Condensation, you often get condensation with a secondary panel. They wouldn't be as good in keeping the noise out. And again, you know, I've seen these secondary panels as a sort of harbour for dust and dirt. So my line is that the acoustic benefits, the thermal benefits of these new slimline cylinder glass double units should be installed. We have got a very special project here. It's, you know, going to be a top boutique hotel. We're trying to produce the very best. And the very best aesthetically, but the very best internally too, creating that environment. And I don't want to think that I might be sitting there having my drink in the bar with all the noise from the traffic outside, some condensation at the windows, drafts coming through. You know, I do get the argument too that shutters and curtains would assist. But come on, if you've got a fit-for-purpose double-glazed window, you know, isn't that what we should be voting for in this instance? You know, I've been there, you know, I'm there nearly every week. I go past that building and I have seen the shocking state that it's in. I'm not throwing any mud at the Executive Officer for Education, but, you know, I do feel as an authority we have not looked after this building well. We've, you know, it is a prize-listed building and, you know, I'm right with the Conservation Officer. I want to maintain and keep this building and ensure it's one of the best buildings in Alnwick. But, you know, as an authority, we've let ourselves down here. NCC has not maintained and kept this building well. I want this building to be very, very special. You know, yes, I have an interest. I'm very much into tourism. I'm a hotelier myself. I've been one for 35 years. You know, I see this could be a great, great project. But, you know, I'm slightly saddened that the mover of the motion thinks that these windows will be as good as the secondary glazed units, because I severely doubt it. So I will be one of those voting against the motion. Thank you.
Just a very quick point, Chair. It is important that the point is around conservation, about planning law and grounds. That's where I'm coming from. It's not about personal preferences, about sitting by the bar, not wanting condensation or whatever you were saying.
Point taken. Councillor Watson.
I've had listed buildings myself. I've had windows that I could repair and put in extra secondary glazing. It was the worst thing I ever did to that house. They look absolutely awful. The effect of them takes away some of your windowsills, makes the place look absolutely awful. And you know, wood doesn't last forever. We have to replace it. And if we want to replace it, let's replace it as closely as we possibly can, which I understand is what's happening here. I'm disappointed that somehow or other, and the applicant and the officers haven't agreed whether these things are beyond repair or not. So you spin a coin and decide, you know, is it or isn't it? But on the balance of things, if there's no effect to the public outside, I don't see how it's a great historical thing to keep a piece of wood, which is 100 years old, which looks exactly the same as a piece of wood that's brand new, but looks exactly the same, because it has to happen in many cases. It just has to happen. So I am not going to support this acceptance, and I will vote against it, like I think Trevor's going to as well.
Councillor Hunter.
Yes, I think it's been very handy having the Conservation Officer here to explain that there's more than windows that will retain heat and other measures that we can put in place. And I am sympathetic with the applicant, but I think we have to look at what the laws is and what has to be followed. And I think, yes, wood won't last forever, but I don't think they're saying that they can't replace the wood. What they're saying is it's not to be secondary or double glazed, and I think that's my understanding of it. Thank you.
Councillor Seymour.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I live in a grade 2-star building myself with shutters. I think windows really are the eyes of a building, a structure. And I notice if there's double glazing or single glazing. And we really have to protect our heritage buildings, because, you know, we lose them. I mean, there are some wooden buildings that are 500 or years more old. If wood is maintained, painted, looked after, it will last a long time. We've got many, many heritage buildings in this country made of wood that last. So I can't, you know, that argument that wood doesn't last is not true. So I think really, historically, an architectural interest in this building, and in an area, a conservation area with heritage buildings, I really think that we should preserve this. And so, yes, as I seconded, I'm going to agree with the officer's recommendation to refuse this application. Thank you.
Councillor Hunter Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. If the windows were in repairable condition, I would agree with Councillor Seymour, but they're not. They were knackered 15 years ago when I was at school there. The local authority certainly hasn't spent any money maintaining them because it was a leased building rather than an owned building. I don't doubt the integrity of the Conservation Officer. I think her interpretation of the law is absolutely correct. However, I disagree with that law entirely. The ongoing purpose of the building to become a hotel should override the special characteristics of these windows, because if we don't let them change the windows, then it will diminish the experience of the people who are going to use the hotel. And as long as the windows look the same on the outside as they do now, I can't see a problem with letting them change them.
Councillor Seymour.
Just on that point, I mean, if there are some of the windows that are, you know, have dry rot and have to be replaced, although I'm not convinced, the conservation officer said, you know, that they believe that they're all right, but anyway, someone could check, then they could be replaced, but with single glaze, not double.
What's the problem with double?
This is asking for double glaze, whereas if the windows are beyond repair, then they can be replaced with single glaze, not double glaze, which is being asked for. That's all.
Councillor Watson.
I just don't see what the problem is with double glaze against single glaze, to be perfectly honest, because they just, you know, that double glazing these days, it's what you put in. It's so minute, so closely resembling single glaze. I just don't see what the problem is. I don't think this report is actually refusing the double glazing. It seems to me it's about replacing the wooden stuff, isn't it? And,
No, it's
and keeping that.
no, it's replacing the whole window with double glaze. If the windows are not able to be repaired and they have to be replaced, then with single glaze, because that's what heritage buildings have, single glaze, all of them.
Thank you for that comment.
Unless they've had, you know, managed to get planning permission. But I certainly can tell if there's double or single glaze. And it does change the look of the building, heritage listed buildings. Absolutely.
Thank you. As someone that's had windows replaced, sash and case, I put in double glazing instead of single glazing, and everyone else round about in the conservation area put in plastic. So, you know, sometimes we just have to take a deep breath and a little thought. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chair. I also appreciate having the conservation officer here. I think that's the first time, and it's lovely to see her here. I think we should be taking our historic buildings extremely seriously, and I was happy to support the change to a hotel. However, I don't want to go against what our planning officers have said. They say we should refuse permission. The conservation officer says we should refuse permission, and I don't think I know better than the planning officers and the conservation officer.
Is there any more comments? Councillor Hell, do you want to sum up?
Just very briefly, I've often made the point, and the whole planning system is geared to presumption in favour of developers. And I know it's difficult in law, and I know that officers generally have to follow the law and the fact that appeals can be successful and so on. So I think that we particularly have to listen when the officer is recommending refusal and the conservation officer is recommending refusal on quite strong terms. I think we all need to. We can all maybe fall into this trap. I think sometimes, and maybe one or two in this case, the starting point is they just want to approve it. But we have to think of the planning law and our duty on historic conservation. So I just repeat that I would support the officer's recommendation wholeheartedly.
In that case, we go to a vote. So the motion that's on the table is to refuse the application. Those in favour, please raise their hands. Those against? And on this occasion, I will abstain. So the motion is passed and permission is refused. On the second planning application, 21/03039, very cool. Do we have any proposals? Councillor Hell.
It's the same again, isn't it? Support the officer's recommendation.
I think she needs a microphone on. Microphone.
Oh, sorry. I support the officer's recommendation that we refuse this application. I move that motion.
Again, we have a motion on the table to go with the officer's recommendation and refuse permission. If there's anyone wanting to discuss this further, or we take the same arguments that we've just been through, we can go straight to a vote. So those in favour? And those against? Thank you. Abstain. Right, I'll just confirm that I'm going to abstain on this one. Again, and I take everything into consideration. This permission again is refused, and we move on to the next item on the agenda. Agenda item 8, application 21/03766 full. Proposed front and rear pitched roof dormers at 24 George Street, Amble. Can we have an update and presentation from the officers, please?
Refer to some weight given to the emerging NLP, the Northumberland Local Plan. The independent examination of the Northumberland Local Plan has now concluded. Inspectors consider that, subject to a number of recommended main modifications, the NLP is sound and provides an appropriate basis for planning of the county. The plan is in the final stage of preparation. There are no unresolved objections, and the plan is consistent with national policy, and therefore significant weight can now be given to the policies of the NLP. Officers have assessed the proposal against the policies of the local plan and can confirm that the change in weight of the plan will not result in a change to the recommendation. Following a previous refusal, the applicant now seeks consent for a pitched roof dormer to the front and rear roof pitches and replacing an existing and unauthorised flat roof dormer on the rear pitch. The air photograph and the plan indicated shows the site, and they are indicated by arrows on both of those. Set within a residential area of Amble, on a residential street, and it is within the Amble Conservation Area. The proposed rear dormer will be a reduction in size from the existing and unauthorised dormer on this roof pitch by approximately a third. That is an approximation, about a third, give or take. With the existing dormer covering most of the rear pitch roof, as well as the inclusion of a pitch roof, and I'll show a photo of that shortly, so you get a better idea of the size and dimensions of it. But as you can see from the plan shown, the rear dorm, which is the larger one seen in the lower one, does take up about just over half of the roof space. The front dormer is smaller in nature, and whilst this type of dormer is not evident throughout the immediate area, there are examples of this dormer style within the conservation area. And again, a smaller dormer, the proposed front on the left, and on the right, the proposed rear elevation. These photos simply show the existing arrangement on the site, including the existing rear dormer, and that's the photo on the right, the rather ugly flat roof dormer that sits virtually across the full width of that rear pitch of that particular property. That's actually set within a terrace, but within that particular property. Mr Chairman, 2 objections have been raised regarding car parking and the impact on the character and appearance of the proposed development on the dwelling itself. The officer has assessed these issues and considers there will be no direct impact on car parking. The impact of the host dwelling is acceptable in planning terms, and certainly in terms of scale, design and finish, and the recommendation is for approval, subject to conditions set out in the report. Mr Chairman.
Thank you. We have no speakers from the public, so we'll move straight on to questions to the officers from members. Do we have any questions for the officers? Councillor Watson.
Just to clarify, that street, George Street, has no dormers at the moment, has it? Look, I know the street, I know it hasn't, and you've got your photograph shows it hasn't as well.
That's right.
I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
And I'll say the rest later. Thank you.
Any other questions? In that case, do we have anyone wishing to make a proposal? Councillor Clark.
I propose we accept this application.
What's it? Accept. I'll second that.
Councillor Watson seconds. Thank you. So we have a motion on the table. Is there anyone wishing to raise any points of debate? Councillor Watson.
First thing I'd like to say is that I'm delighted to see that a refusal for an existing building which was turned down has been acted upon. I'm delighted to see that, and that we've got a new application to replace the old illegal one. I can't remember this happening too often, but I'm pleased to see it. I'm not entirely happy with it, because as I pointed out, George Street doesn't have any dormers. But having read the report, I don't think I've got anything planning-wise that I can stand on. So that's why I'm saying approve it. I think the problem that some people have seen is that it's obviously a holiday let building. You only have to go there to see it is, and you can see the applicant doesn't live there. So that's why there's always an issue in that particular area about extra holiday lets and about car parking as well. But unfortunately, that is not a planning consideration. So all in all, on balance, I'm going to vote to approve the application.
Councillor Clark.
Well, I believe the design does not dominate the roof space. It complements the existing features of the dwelling, and it's not prominent along the terrace properties. The pitched roof of the dormers run level with the ridge line of the dwelling's roof. The conservation area requires a pitched roof, which these dormers have, and the materials used match the existing buildings. We do have concerns with parking in this area, but as stated in the report, it can't be used against the application. So I propose this application be granted permission with officers' conditions, and these dormers complement the shape of the building and within the street.
Councillor Hell.
Apologies, Chair. I was just sort of waiting for other people to sort of ask questions and sort of start weighing all this up. And I am going to go back to a question, if I may. Has the conservation officer commented on this? Just all I know from a conservation point of view, pitched roofs are usually something that ears go up and are usually a cause of concern. It obviously is a concern to some residents and objectors. So I was just wondering if the conservation officer has been discussed this one.
Mr Chairman, no, the conservation weren't consulted on this application because of the type of application. It's a householder, and they weren't consulted on it.
Thank you. Councillor Thorne.
Yes, Chair. It was just to go back to the photo. And I noticed those two dormers there to the right-hand side. Are they on the back or the front of the building?
They're two different shots, aren't they? The two different photographs.
No, I'm asking the
Mr. Chairman,
planning officer.
that's the real elevation.
That's the rear elevation,
Yeah,
so
that's
those dormers are on the rear.
Yeah, there are, like I said, the ugly looking flat roof dormer there is the unauthorised dormer that is currently on that rear elevation.
Right. Lovely, thank you.
Any other questions? Sorry, debate? Would you like to sum up, Councillor Clark?
Well, as stated, this extension is not too prominent and I believe acceptable, so I propose the application be granted, permission with officer's conditions.
In that case, we'll go to a vote. Those in favour of the application being granted, please raise their hands. Those opposed? Abstentions? In that case, the motion is passed and permission is granted. Thank you. Next on the agenda is item 9, application 21/03848, full construction of a single-storey front extension, Beachley Bungalow 67 Longstone Park, Beadnell. Could we have an update and presentation from the officer? Thank you.
Of the officer report, which refer to some weight given to the emerging NLP, the Northumberland Local Plan. The independent examination of the Northumberland Local Plan has concluded. The inspectors consider that subject to a number of recommended main modifications, the NLP is sound and provides an appropriate basis for the planning of the county. The plan is in the final stage of preparation, there are no unresolved objections and the plan is consistent with national policy, and therefore significant weight can now be given to the policies in the NLP. Officers have assessed the proposal against the policies of the local plan and can confirm that the change in weight of the plan will not result in a change to the recommendation. The application or the applicant seeks consent for a single-storey front extension. The air photograph and location plan there show the site, and again they are indicated by arrows. It's set within a residential street within Beadnell and is within the AOMB, but is out with the Beadnell Conservation Area. The drawings up show in plan form the current arrangement of a broadly L-shaped dwelling. The proposed changes, or the proposed drawings, show in plan form again the intention to infill that L shape, if you like, and relocate the living room and the creation of a dining room for the dwelling. The existing and proposed elevations that we're now coming to, again show in elevation form, shows the look of the building before and after development, and the proposed elevations are showing that infill, the external finish, will be finished in brick. The slide shows the existing external finish, which again is set out in brick, and the additional doors are intended. Mr. Chairman, the PC have objected to the proposal due to concerns on car parking and local context, and the AOMB partnership consider the extension too large. Following officer assessment, it is considered that as a modest extension, we have no additional bedrooms proposed. There will be no increased parking impact or need for the need over the existing arrangements that already exist there. Set within a residential street, the modest nature of the proposal will not prove to be too large, with ample external amenity space remaining. The dwelling will remain in general conformity with its surroundings without adversely impacting local landscapes and will not have an adverse impact on the wider AU and B because it is already set within that residential line, within a residential development. Mr Chairman, this development remains sustainable, development in a sustainable location, and the recommendation is that consent be granted subject to conditions set out in the report. Mr Chairman.
Thank you. We now have an elected member who is Jeff Martindale, and you have 5 minutes to state your case. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing me to speak. This planning application concerns a chalet which is part of a group of 8 attached properties. There are 36 of these L-shaped chalets on Longston Park in Beadnell built around 1968. At that time, they were subject to an agreement dated 25th of June 1968 between the estate developers M.J. Little & Son Limited and Northumberland County Council, which prohibited the erection of any building or structure on the amenity areas. The Council would know if this agreement was still in place. If it is, then this application contravenes that agreement. This is the second planning application to infill the amenity area of the L-shaped design of one of these 36 chalets on Longston Park, altering the local context and character of the estate. The precedent referred to by the planning officer for this type of front extension was set last year when approval was given for Sunrise Cottage, that's 55 Longston Park, to build on their amenity area. The AONB was not consulted on the Sunrise Cottage planning application, but they have been consulted on the Beach Lee bungalow, and they do not support this application. As the design is exactly the same, it is highly likely that had they been consulted, the AONB would not have supported that application either. The Parish Council is concerned that the precedent set by the Sunrise Cottage is being used today to recommend planning permission. Sunrise Cottage has been given approval without adequate consultation. The Parish Council objected to the planning application for Sunrise Cottage, but this was not referred to the Planning Committee, whereas this application has been referred to you for consideration today because the Parish Council objected. We welcome this change of approach and the increased emphasis on the views and knowledge of the local community, and we hope that despite the previous approval, you will not rely on the anomalous precedent. We trust that you will refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, questions to the officers? Councillor Hunter.
Yes. First of all, a comment on page 50. They're referring to the Annick District Local Plan. Beadnell, for all my knowledge, was in Berwick area, not Annick. The Parish Council's referring to a 1968 agreement. Would that be taken into account on this application, or is that possibly too old?
I mean, it may well still be in place, but what we would say is it's out with the control of planning. It's not a material planning consideration. It would be a separate civil matter.
Councillor Seymour.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wondered, the AONB do not support this application because the extension is too large and will impact on the original design of the building group in changing the layout and roof line. And I'm just wondering what the officer would like to say on this, on why they have not taken note of this when reviewing this and wanting to grant the permission.
Mr Chairman, the comments of the AONB have been considered during when the officer made the assessment. The officer does not agree with those comments clearly in making the recommendation. The proposal sees an infill on an existing dwelling house, which seems acceptable in all other respects. It's not going to increase anything to do with parking. The visual impact, if you like, the impact on the character and the appearance of of the dwelling itself and the wider street scene is considered to be acceptable. And the type of development that it is, that is to say, a householder style development, a small extension type of development, set within an existing residential street, an existing development, is not going to impact the wider A1B area. But certainly the officer has fully considered, as they would do with all comments that put through to it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Hell.
Thank you. Apologies if you did mention it. I'm just looking through the sort of grounds for objecting that have been set out. What was the sort of status of the situation with car parking? You said there's not adequate car parking, which is required.
Mr. Chairman, there's no additional bedrooms being created on the site. It's still going to be a one-bedroom property. There's no impact on the requirement for car parking there at all, or no greater impact for the requirement of car parking there at all. Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions? In that case, we'll go to debate. Do we have any proposals? Councillor Renner Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. I will move refusal of the application based on Policy 5 of the Northumberland Coast Neighbourhood Plan. The application, what's the exact words? The application fails to respect the local context and character of the area.
Councillor Seymour has seconded that proposal.
Do you want to speak now or later?
Sorry, can you just repeat obviously it was Policy 5 of the Northumberland Plan that fails to respect the local context.
Anyone else wish to add to the debate? In that case, we have a motion on the table to refuse planning permission. Those in favour, raise your hand. Sorry, Guy.
It's quite all right. It's quite all right.
Try to keep you quiet.
It's hard to describe unless you've actually been there, but essentially you've got an estate of almost identical small bungalows that's been that way since they were built, and changing one of them in this way would completely change the streetscape of that particular estate to the detriment of the other properties. If the extension was to the rear, where it wasn't visible, I think it would be more acceptable. However, changing the frontage of the bungalow is not something that would accord with the neighbourhood plan.
Thank you. So, back to where I was. We have a motion on the table to refuse this application. Those in favour, raise their hands. Those against? And those who wish to abstain? One. The motion has passed and permission is refused. Thank you.
Just before we go on to the next matter that the Chair is going to go on to, the TPO, Councillor Watson, I have just found earlier the relevant part of the Constitution, which is in, just bear with me, Chapter 2, Guidance for Elected Members and Officers Dealing with Planning Matters, and it's at 4.6, and it refers to various things, but also says serving members who submit or act as agents for people pursuing a planning matter within the council must play no part in the decision-making process for that proposal. So you did request the TPO. So according to that paragraph, you shouldn't take any part. I'm afraid I think you will have to leave the room.
Thank you. We're now going to proceed to item 10 on the agenda, which is a tree preservation order, PKT 0686. And it's a new tree preservation order, Northumberland County Council, land west of Gloucester Meadows, Amble, Northumberland. So, is there a presentation?
Mr Chairman, first of all, if again I could update members, and if members could turn to paragraphs 6.3 and 6.6 of the report. First of all, paragraph 6.3, where both of them actually refer to the removal of trees from the garden areas of 17 and 18 Robson's Way. The last line of paragraph 6.3 should read 16 and 18 Robson's Way, and the modification will exclude small areas to the rear of 16, 17 and 18 Robson's Way. That's the idea of the modification that's been put forward for you today. So, referring to both those paragraphs, referring to the back of two houses, it's actually three houses, all in the line.
Can I just ask, Chair, in respect of that, Tony, is there a change to the actual recommendation, because that does refer to 17 and 18? So is there an amendment to the actual recommendation at para 7?
Just where it refers to 16, 17 and 18 again.
So the recommendation refers to numbers 16, 17 and 18 in the recommendation?
Yeah. If members have seen that, but again, as just explained on the recommendation, where it refers to paragraph 16, 17, where it refers to housing, where it refers to the numbers of 17 and 18, it should be 16, 17 and 18 as it goes through on the recommendation. Mr Chairman.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
That was just an update, Mr Chairman.
Oh, sorry, I'm ahead of myself again. There we go. We had a late night last night. I want to get home early tonight. Thank you.
Can't blame you for that. Can't blame you. Right, okay. The report seeks confirmation of the tree preservation order as modified, as it's been set out in the report. The air photograph in front of you shows the area of the woodline in question, and it's shown on that photograph as a continuous woodline. As set out in the report, it's actually been now divided by acts that have taken place since that photograph that has divided it, and it's referred to as W1 and W2. This photograph is an indication, and is looking from the B6345 towards, in the immediate foreground, W2, what's referred to as W2 within the report, and indicates the type of tree cover that's in question. Looking towards the plan on the left, it's showing where the two lines, or two areas outlined in black, W1 at the top and W2 at the bottom. The area in between those is where it's been cut, it's been divided by a service strip that's gone through to provide services to the existing residential development beyond. And that is what's creating the W1 and W2 areas. The centre one is indicating the strip of land behind 16, 17 and 18, where there's a slight modification taking place on that line. where that line is taking, going around the gardens that have already been bought, and the trees have actually been removed, so there's nothing to actually preserve there. And the right-hand side is just a blow-up image of W2 and where it sits on the roadside there. There have been 2 objections received within the relevant time frame, which have raised concerns set out, which have been set out in the report. On balance, and as set out in the report, the LPA consider that due to the tree size, the visibility within the public realm, their amenity value and future longevity, as well as the perceived threat to the woodland, because a number of people do wish to buy that land and clear it, as has already been done for some of the garden land. The trees are of sufficient value to create a TPO. But I would point out that the option for individuals to buy that land still exists, although future maintenance may require further consent if the TPO is confirmed today. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any questions to the officers? Councillor Swingbank.
Thank you, Chair. In the report, there's a mention of a public right-of-way. Could you indicate where the public right-of-way is, please?
Mr. Chairman, I don't think I can. Could you give us a reference for that, please?
It's certainly mentioned.
2.1.
There was a public right-of-way.
I don't think I can, other than to say that it is to the north. I certainly don't have a slide of that. No, I wouldn't be able to actually point that out at all.
Just for clarification, would a preservation order affect a public right-of-way in any way at all?
Mr. Chairman, no.
Councillor Hell.
Thank you, Chair. Can you just indulge me? I want to ask a general question because there's not going to be a huge amount in this particular application. Is there, it might seem to say, is there a document, a tree strategy for the county? Because there are issues with tree preservation, appropriate spots for planting. It's just, and they've obviously had issues with the damage caused to the storm and so on. Is there a tree strategy? Is there one document that reviews a whole policy on trees? If not, I think there should be one, or at least a review of what there is.
I was going to say, not that I'm aware of. The individual plans at the moment, the current plans that we're using, some of them have policies covering the trees, some of them don't. I know in Berwick there's a requirement for a replacement when trees are taken out. In Alnwick there isn't. What we really rely on when we're assessing the trees is the planning practice guidance, the tree preservation orders and trees and conservation areas, which was published in 2014. But we ourselves, as the council, we don't have any.
Other people think, but I think that would be a good idea because it's just there's so many challenges about getting work done in areas where there's. I know I'm going slightly off point, but I just wondered if people agree with me that would be. I think that'd be really useful. I don't know. It's maybe another channel that I should bring it up.
But I think there's a great interest in trees. And we will be testing our green credentials. But moving on, is there any other questions for the officer? Councillor Thorne.
Could I move the tree preservation order, Chairman?
Can I just clarify, so that's the officer's recommendation with the modification, as per the report?
Councillor Swinbank.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, I'm supporting the recommendation. Obviously, what we've seen here is what looks like it's a shelter belt put in for the housing development. It may have been there before the houses were built, of course, but it will divide the two sets of housing up. And as we've seen over the last, well, certainly over the last few months, the just devastation that's been caused to our trees and the kind of huge outpouring of grief that people feel to that devastation. Tree preservation orders obviously don't mean that you can't do works on trees, but it means that they are protected. And I know in my own ward, when trees get cut down, usually due to planning consents, there's a huge kind of cry of angst. And so I think where we can protect trees through tree preservation orders, I think that is a good thing. And I think if it's sensibly applied, and the officers have obviously looked at these trees and decided that they are well worthy of protection, then I think we should support the application.
Thank you. Any other contributions to the debate? In that case, we have a motion before us.
I've got nothing to add, Chair, other than I think it's a sensible.
There you go, racing ahead once again. So we now have a motion on the table to in place the tree preservation order. All those in favour, raise their hands.
It's unanimous.
That's unanimous. That has been carried. Thank you. Okay, we are now on to agenda item 11, which is the appeals update report that everyone has before them. And this simply lists the appeals, and it is recommended that you note the contents of these reports. Is there anything to say other than we accept this?
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Hell.
Sorry, I knew there was one. Page 79, the new external plan as to Main Street, Tweedmarsh. Is there any expected date when that be considered?
We've had a lot of appeal decisions come through lately, but this hasn't been one of them. I'll double check for you, and I'll let you know.
Perfect.
Okay?
Thanks, Vivian. That's great.
Okay, we move on again to agenda item 12. And this is the S106 Agreements Update Report. And again, the purpose of this report is before you. And the recommendation again is that you note the contents of this report. Is there any comments, or can we accept the report as is?
Agreed.
Thank you. We're going to have a short break while the officers may leave, and then we'll move on to Northumberland Local Area Council Local Transport Plan Programme 22-23. Thank you. We are now back on live stream and we are at agenda item 13, which is the local transport plan. So I'm immediately going to hand this over to the relevant officers. Paul, it's with you.
Thank you, Chair. So you have the report in front of you, and what I'd like to do is just have a quick run through some of the key elements of that with you. So obviously the report sets out the draft local transport plan for the next financial year, and we've basically gone through this as the final stage of consultation before the report and the programme's finalised in advance of the start of the next financial year, so we can get cracking.
We are now back on live stream and we are at agenda item 13, which is the local transport. You did not know that I was a ventriloquist? And working out the exact delay time has been a scientific feat in itself. Thank you. Back to Paul.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce Rob, who's our infrastructure manager, who's here to help me answer some of the queries as well. So the LTP allocation that we've based the programme on is based on the indicative allocation of £23.5 million. We haven't actually had final confirmation from DFT that that's the figure that we will receive in the coming financial year, but we are confident it's the same figure we've received previously. We've been in dialogue with them and there's no indication that it's going to be any different, basically. So that's what we're basing the programme on. The programme is, as you'll see within the appendix and the report itself, split across 4 key areas. So it includes measures and activity in relation to cycling and walking, in relation to safety, in terms of road maintenance, and then also in terms of bridges, structures and landslips. So the programme is drawn up based on a review of the maintenance needs of the entire highways asset, and also any identified road safety issues and potential improvements to the transport network that have came forward, and that includes the priorities that have been put forward by your good selves as county councillors and also from the town and parish councils across the county. So the programme is split into the 4 appendices where you see the detail of the individual schemes that are listed as A to D. And just again to summarise those, the walking and cycling element includes a total of schemes valued at £1.3 million, the safety at £2.1 million, and approximately 15.3, the majority of the funding in terms of highway maintenance activity. But this year, a significantly higher element of 4.7 million for bridges and structures and landslips, and I'll come on to the detail as to why that is further on in the report. So some of the key points to note, in terms of the walking and cycling allocations, they are split between improvements, and that includes things such as crossing points, new footways, bus stop waiting areas to help people access public transport, as well as just maintenance of footways, cycleways and maintenance of the rights-of-way network in the county. It's worth noting that in addition to the LTP allocations that are detailed in this report, that the County Council has also allocated 1.5 million within the medium-term financial plan following the budget meetings yesterday, specifically for the delivery of walking and cycling schemes across the county, and that's part of the local cycling walking infrastructure plans, or LC WIPs process, that's ongoing at the moment, and that there's a consultation about to start in terms of the detail of those that affects the main towns in the county. Would also highlight that there were a number of requests and priorities put forward from county councils and town and parish councils about the introduction of new cycleways and footways, and that some of those unfortunately were significantly above the level of funding that we have available within the LTP to support that type of activity. These haven't been forgotten about. We have captured those, and we will work with colleagues in the transport team to identify alternative funding opportunities for those as and when opportunities arise through government funding and other funding that comes available on that. So we will keep those in mind whenever anything comes forward to see if we can actually take some of those and deliver them. In terms of the safety schemes, the majority of that is focused around high risk sites where there's been patterns of injury accidents over the past 3 years, as well as areas in both the urban and rural road networks where there's identified safety concerns. In addition to those, as part of the safety programme, we do undertake traffic management and speed reduction schemes. They tend to be much smaller schemes across the county. And we'll also be continuing the 20 mile an hour outside schools programme of activity. And there's £500,000 been allocated to that in the coming financial year that will support the full completion of that programme. What I would say in terms of that 20 mile an hour at schools programme, it has been running for a number of years now. We have completed 107 schemes compared to the 161 schools where we think 20 mile an hour schemes are possible. There's a further 10 schemes issued for construction currently, and there's 44 that are at various stages of the design process. So we are, well on with that work and are coming to the end of that process now. In terms of the other aspects of the safety schemes, we have allocated £350,000 specifically for the refurbishment and renewal of existing signage and road markings. This is an area that we get a lot of concerns raised by members and parish councils, where basically white lines or signs are faded or aren't as highly visible as what they should be. And we prioritise that funding to tackle those that are causing the most road safety concerns and where there's the best bang for the buck. In terms of the roads maintenance programme, it is a wide-ranging programme. It entails maintenance schemes across the whole county. So this includes things such as structural patching, resurfacing, as well as our big programme of surface dressing that takes place over the summer, and also the microsurfacing that's predominantly in the urban areas as a new treatment that's been used in recent years. So together with those allocations, there's also provision for work on carriageway structures, drainage, car parks and traffic signals. And again, that element of the programme has been developed based on highway asset management principles and the feedback that we've had in terms of the condition of the highways asset. I think, again, just worth noting that in addition to the £23.5 million within the LTP, the County Council has now agreed a further £2 million of its own capital to be allocated specifically for a programme of highway maintenance investment on UNC roads and footways across the county. And that's a programme that we're in the final stages now. We're just drafting up a programme of, and that follows on from the £15 million that's been allocated over the last 2 financial years undertaking that same type of activity, which has been really warmly received, certainly from us as officers, in terms of the difference it's making to the network. The final element of the programme is around the bridges, structures and landslips, and that's predominantly around tackling understrength bridges, as well as undertaking essential maintenance to our existing bridges. And you'll see within there, particularly in the Berwick area, there's a £500,000 allocation for masonry repairs to the ongoing refurbishment works of the historic Grade 1 listed Berwick Hall Bridge that I understand from Councillor Seymour's just won a bronze award internationally for the quality of the restoration works that have been undertaken to date. So that's a real good accolade for the staff involved in that activity. No. So that's really good. Obviously, you'll all be aware that there's the ongoing works to the Union Chain Bridge as well, and there's an allocation to address some of the pressures that are being faced there as well within the programme. I think most importantly, there's also a very significant allocation to address the major landslip that's been occurring at Weldon Bridge on the Todsteads rather, on the Weldon Bridge to Rothbury Road. That's a historic issue that's been causing problems for many a year now. That it's something that the County Council has already been undertaking significant geotechnical works and ground investigations to look at a long-term solution. In the current financial year, we've now allocated within this proposed programme a further 1.86 million of the LTP capital to support that, together with a further £2.8 million of County Council capital funding in the coming year rather, and that's part of a £9.3 million overall scheme that will take approximately 2 years to deliver to basically put in place a long-term engineered solution to the landslip in that area. It is a particularly difficult site, it has to be said. There are complex geotechnical issues within the valley itself, not helped by the geotechnical properties of the soils. There's artesian water pressures, so when you drill a hole, lots of water squirts out at you. and also it's in a high conservation area. It's right next to the SSI River Corket, so we have to be really careful and conscious, and just working in a very cramped area as well. So that's where we're at in terms of the programme. We're more than happy to take your feedback in relation to the proposals before they're finalised. Thank you.
We have a number of hands raised, so we will just start with Guy Rana Thompson and we will work up the table.
Thank you, Paul. This is a specific parochial question, as they all will be. On the page 106, the other local roads Northumberland, you've got the C60 Cragmill Road, Belford, east of A1, and C60 Cragmill Road, Belford, west of A1. Has that work not already been done?
Not as far as I'm aware, but I'll check.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, it has been done. Yeah.
Councillor Watson.
I just first of all say I do admire the amount of work that goes into preparing this plan. I think the officers do a good thing. I don't want to be parochial and spend everybody being bored about my own individual areas. I would deal with them separately. But I've got two comments to make. One's in my area and one's not in my area. Guy's Mill, the landslip management, it's got £80,000 in. Does that include the work on the carriageway when you fix the bank slip, Paul? I mean, it's because the road itself is very poor along there, as well as the. I just wonder if it's all part of the same package. And you probably don't know the answer because it's a complex one. But if you'd let me know, I'd be obliged.
We'll check that out.
Okay.
So you
and
say the road surface is damaged
as well. Yeah, I'm sure the officers will tell you that. And the second one was just a comment. Gashouse Lane, Morpeth is not my patch, but it's right next to the new leisure centre. And I think that you probably would hope that you're not going to repair the road next to it until the work on the leisure centre is finished, because at the moment the scaffolding in. And is it to sort of repair it and put a path in? And do you know if that's what it's for?
Again,
No.
if you know about the scheme. If we'd need to check, because I don't know the details of that scheme, but as a matter of default, we wouldn't seek to undertake any works until the construction works within the leisure centre is done, because otherwise the construction traffic can damage the road surface.
Because I think, as I understand it, the date for completion of Morpeth Leisure Centre is not till March next year.
Right.
That doesn't mean that you can't do Gashouse Lane before. I don't know. I'm not technical, but I just think it would be worth looking at, Paul.
Yeah.
And that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Thorne.
Yes, Chairman. Just want to thank the officers for the huge investment in the Toddstead landslip. You know, as you say, it's a very complicated problem we've got there. Water coming down the hillside, eddying from the bottom of the River Corket. It's a real nightmare of a job. But you know what I would say is, you know, I would like to think this is going to be a once and for all, but I very much doubt it. That low road that borders the River Corket, ever since I've been a boy, it has been slipping into the river. So much appreciated what you're doing at the moment, but you know, I do think in the future we'll be back there. But I thank you for that huge investment of cash. Many thanks.
Close the road, block it off.
I don't want to go on record as saying it is a once and for all, because you never can tell, but certainly the intention is that we look at an engineered solution that will address the slip there. It is a complex, as you're well aware, and you know, we look at the extent of the landslip. It is the whole of the hillside that is moving. There's various slip planes within it as well. But the scheme is significant. It is a significant length that we're tackling.
Much appreciated.
Councillor Hell.
Thank you. Just one or two general points and a couple of quick specific points. When I looked at this, not just my own area, but across the piece, there seemed to be things that were on the provisional LTP that aren't on it. Now, I sent an email to officers regarding that, and there was some suggestion that There is going to be another 2 million. So the schemes that aren't sitting on there that were on the draft may come back. Or was I fobbed off when I was told that? To keep me quiet, because if you don't know anything about that.
So obviously the process we go through is that we get all of the priorities that both members and town and parish councils put forward. Those are discussed within the workshops with each LAC to go through that prioritisation process. In terms of the level of demand versus the amount of funding we've got, we're way oversubscribed through that whole process. We only get around about 1.65 million from government for the safety integrated transport. We actually allocate money in excess of £2 million to that, so we're actually taking money out of highway maintenance to look at safety and improvement schemes as part of that. In terms of that, the maintenance schemes, everything that was, even if it was a high priority within the individual LAC as part of that workshop, we then have to look at that in the entirety of the county. So even some of the higher scoring priority schemes within an individual LAC area might not score as highly when you start looking at the other demands elsewhere across the whole county. That's part of the difficulty that we face in pulling together the programme. But as you rightly say, if it's a maintenance scheme that you're concerned about, there is that additional funding, the £2 million that has been allocated now as part of the County Council's medium-term financial plan for the coming financial year. And we are pulling together a programme of UNC road and footway maintenance that will be put into the Cabinet portfolio holder
because
in the near future.
Sorry, as Rob knows, there's a scheme in Highcliffe. The road, Graham Butnell saw it and he said, "Oh my God, yeah, that road is completely crumbling," is the word. If it doesn't get done, I'll be murdered.
Do you want to tell us what the nature of...
Hey, right? So, no, if it gets done, I'll give the administration even more hassle than I normally do. So there's a flip in that. But did say that's high up and on the brink. So please give me some...
So it's a road maintenance scheme in Highcliffe that you're concerned about? Right.
But I was told that was high up in the contenders for this extra money. So
Dale's working through that £2 million
Dale,
programme just now.
Would you put in a good word?
I think the word has already been put in.
You just do it again.
Mark. Councillor Swinbank.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you very much for the bridleway between the high school and St James Ram. It's something I've been asking for about 6 years now, long before I was a county councillor. Can I ask whether there is lighting with that scheme or whether it's just the bridleway itself?
I would presume that the scheme still hasn't been designed yet because obviously it's just in the programme. So if there's lighting needed because of the nature of the location, you would expect generally within an urban area that would be lit fundamentally. But it would be part of the scheme design.
That's good because it kind of goes behind the back of the rugby club and whatnot, so it does get dark. And the other one is Narrowgate. Great that we've got the go-ahead to pedestrianise it. It's been long in the LTP. I'm just a little concerned of the timescale it might take to deliver. I'll just lay that there before you because I don't know what you can do about that. But it'll have to be delivered in the winter time, obviously, because the shops, etc., will be disadvantaged. But I'd like to see it sooner rather than later, being as we've had LTP promises for a number of years on Narrowgate.
Yeah, so in terms of the Narrowgate scheme, as we've discussed with your good self and Councillor Castle and the Town Council, the intention is that in the coming financial year we undertake all of the design work, we agree what the spec is, we get it costed, and basically that scheme as a costed scheme will then be put forward for consideration in the 23-24 LTP process. But clearly, if we've done all of the work and we've got all of that ready, we'll be able to then hopefully take that forward more quickly. But depending on the nature of the works, it is quite an involved scheme potentially in terms of changing levels on Narrowgate, things, taking out the road surface and resurfacing the area as a single. single area. So, you know, we have to look at that in terms of the utilities and what's under the ground there as well, in terms of how we would actually get some of those consents in place. But we'll do as much as we can, and certainly take into account the timing to reduce the disruption to the town as part of that.
Thank you, Paul.
Councillor Hunter.
Yes, what I'm wanting to raise is the road through East Ord Village. I did raise it at the workshop, and Andy Craig said he was going to speak to Colas. I was hoping to get it as a Microsoft failure. It was put in possibly about 2016. I contacted Andy again, I think it was last week, and he said Colas was supposed to be coming up on site to have a look at that. And its officers has been out last year, and they've said there's no way they can repair it. It's beyond repair. The haunchings has gone at the side, the centre has gone. There's just no way we can repair it. And that road, if for any reason the 698 Rotary Way gets closed, that's the main route into Berwick for all HGVs, everything. So it's a case of, I know it's not on here, but it's to try and see, we're going to have to do something with it this year. And it is a C road, so I'm not sure if it doesn't make this programme, if it can pick up on the C road funding.
Councillor Seymour.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. There's a good amount of work went into this with the officers, which I really appreciate. I know you try and accommodate all of the priorities that councillors, parish, town councils want, along with obviously the highway officer that goes around as well and has their priorities. So it is a difficult job to get everyone on. Obviously not all my priorities have been put in, but I am pleased to see that the old bridge has got the third phase now in. So we're really almost, I think that's it, isn't it? 3 phases, so that's great. I'm glad to see money in for there. So we've got 23.5 million plus an extra 2 million, so that's 25.5. And I'm just wondering if, I know in the past we've had government money as well. I'm just wondering if we're getting any more from them, if you know, any coming our way. Also, so perhaps some of the work is in a general pot, if you like, the refurbishment and maintenance areas as well. So some of my things could be in there. I just see on the North Road in Berwick, now that's been on there for quite a few years. So is that's not new money, that's money that was already allocated, I think, because the North Road mostly was done, but then there was a bit where there was quite a bit of flooding in the middle near the cemetery, and I think this money is for that. But before it's resurfaced, it has to have you know, some pipe work, drainage work done. So I'm just not sure if that's new money or money that's you've just put back in again.
So basically any schemes that are in the current year's LTP that for whatever reason we aren't able to deliver, and to be fair, there's not many that are looking that way. There's a few microsurfacing ones that we missed out towards the back end of the summer. But, you know, it depends on the weather in the last couple of months of the year. But those will automatically, that funding doesn't go away, it just rolls forward. It's not captured within this because this is £23.5 million of DFT funding that comes to us for the 23-24 or 22-23 financial year. So this is all new money that and new schemes as part of that. So that scheme will be a new scheme on North Road. In terms of any priorities that members put forward that aren't detailed here within the programme as having made the grade, so to speak, there are obviously some various allocations around traffic management schemes, some of the safety schemes as well as the general refurbishment provisions that the area office, highway offices have to do, you know, small scale structural patching works and things such as that. So if there are things that you've put forward as a priority that haven't made it as a scheme, as part of the feedback process that we give to all town and parish councils and county councillors. Once we've finalised this programme, we will be responding to say what's happened with your priorities that put forward. Are they in as a named scheme? Are they in but being done as part of that various county-wide allocations, because the smaller things that can be incorporated into other works? So you'll get that feedback one way or the other within the next couple of months.
Yeah, it's good to see some of them moving up the ladder, if you like, to you know, to actually get on the list. So that's great. The other thing is we have, you know, obviously you mentioned we got a bronze award for an international award for the old bridge restoration work, which was the first stage. But anyway, it was good to get. You know, it's worthy. It's an old bridge, and we're keeping it in good order now. So I was pleased to get that. There's just one thing with the, it has been mentioned, and I've reported it along with other councillors, that the resurfacing of the footpath has failed in some areas, and I understand that it's going to be, anyway, maybe I shouldn't have brought it up here, but I just thought I'd mention it.
No, that's fine. It is an issue that we are aware of,
Yeah.
and it is something that's been taken up with a contractor that actually undertook that. So it is under warranty, and if we're getting them back out, and the intention is that they basically repair it under warranty. So it's at no additional cost
I will also say I was very pleased with the resurfacing of the road, rather than just tarmac. It was that, what's that special name? Sort of, there's bits of cobble. What is it? What was that again? Yes, very good. Yeah, I like that. It looks good. I think it's a bit more expensive, but I think it's worth it because the effect is quite good, and I think it's last alonging, isn't it? Or you don't get potholes in that surfacing.
It's just a longer lasting material with the chips in the surface. Actually, takes an awful lot more grinding from the traffic.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Percy Drive, pedestrian safety, the zebra crossing. I did believe we're going to have 2 zebra crossings along this stretch of road, but this just says zebra crossing.
So I'm not familiar with the details of that scheme, Councillor Clark, so I'll have to check and come back to you. I'll have to check. Yeah.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, I have had a quick word with Robin already. It's just about Ellingham School, which I requested many years ago to have a 20 miles an hour outside, and we still haven't got that. And 2 40s were put in, I think it was in January. The parish council feel that one of the 40s is in the wrong place, but there's nothing else gone in, and so the traffic is actually going faster because the 30s were taken out, and we don't have any 20s.
I'm looking into that.
And that brings you to my good self with my gripes or requests, and 20 mile an hour speed limits. There's long-standing calls for 20 mile an hour speed limit to be in place in LAC. And today when the A1 is closed, that road is facing 90% of the traffic that would have travelled down a major route. And I believe that that should be a priority. Likewise, Norham is another school that has been looked at, but although plans have been drawn up, there's been no action to date that I know of. And on the thanks side, thank you for the work around the chain bridge. Just overwhelmed by watching these guys do what they're doing, and I can't wait till one of my old running routes and present cycling routes is back in operation. Thank you.
Can I raise a general question, please?
Of course you can.
Thank you. Just generally, chaps, when we do remember small schemes, it seems to take an inordinately long time just to get action. Things like interactive speed cameras take months and months and months, like a year. And I'm sure everybody else has got the same experience. Is there nothing we can do to speed this up? I've moaned on about it for a long time, Paul, as you know, but it just still seems to go on. You know, we just don't seem to have any, I can't use a better word, but no sense of urgency about it. And the reason they're there is because we see there's a problem. And it just seems to take forever. Have you got any comments you can make?
Do you want to?
Just from my own point of view, we're working through all those different processes. There are an awful lot of schemes that appear to take a lot longer to deliver than I would have considered reasonable. But from being here a year and a half now, the volume of the programme we actually try and get through and the volume of requests that everyone gets day in, day out, the entire team is constantly swamped by issues that they're dealing with. And so things do take longer to communicate out to members, to then get the funding sorted, to get approval for the funding. So things do take longer. But we will be looking at each process, specifically on the SID signs, the speed interactive devices. We will be trying to produce better guidance so that it's a lot clearer for everyone what type of signs could or should be able to go in specific locations. So hopefully that should be able to improve the process of getting what you want.
If I may just say, I mean, it's not actually so much the process. It's once we've agreed and we've seen the stuff and it's going, it still seems to take forever. And I know, I think you're right. I think you've actually hit the nail on the head. And I've said this before. I think that section in your department is swamped. And, you know, it's been swamped for a long time. Why don't we launch a raft? Why don't we get somebody else? Why don't we expand that department or do something? Because always to say that department's swamped, it's swamped, is not actually sorting the problem.
We are introducing different processes, so hopefully in the next 2 or 3 months we'll have a reporting process out to elected members that will be able to give them far more information in advance of needing to phone into the department to get an update. So hopefully in the next couple of months you'll begin to see more reporting processes and more streamlined processes, and member schemes will be reported in a similar format to reporting on LTP schemes, and hopefully that information will reduce the number of times you have to or feel the need to
Forgive me
chase
then for being
progress.
cheeky, but can I then suggest to the chair that in 3 months' time, you come back and give us that work, or maybe you want 4 months' time, but can we put a time scale on it so that we have a report to this committee about what we're doing?
I think that's a fair request, because I was going to add to some of your comments on the small schemes. I've just had a speed camera posts put in at Fenwick Village, again a road that is being inundated by HGVs today, owing to the closure of the A1. And I've got 2 other schemes, Lowick, 20 mile an hour, and Norham, 20 mile an hour, that I have offered funding for. But they don't seem to progress at any pace at all.
That's the point.
And a valid point, and I would like an answer within a time scale. Councillor Hell.
I wouldn't press exactly the date, but please come back in a reasonable period of time.
Thank you. Yeah, just to add to that, I know Rob is looking at a whole load of new systems with both the way the LTP is done and the small schemes. And just to re-emphasise a point I've made, I really do think that it needs to be reviewed, the rigid 15,000 a year, before there's a flexibility that you could roll it. Because, you know, I've got all this, pretty much 80–90% of my schemes worked out in my mind, and progressing with them, and it just seems a shame the community can't benefit where everything's in place because you've already spent the 15,000 that year. I just think there needs to be more flexibility and discussion about that, because the communities are losing out on that. And I was just going to ask Paul on his list where the the 20 mile an hour where Spittal First School is, because that seemed to be all ready to go, tied in with the resurfacing at Spittal Main Street, and I haven't heard anything since. So I don't know if you've got that on your list.
The west.
Spittal, outside
Spittal,
Spittal First School. You know, the policy of 20 miles an hour outside every school, and that seemed...
I'll see where that's at in the,
if you
in
could,
the process.
sorry, thank you.
Yes, we seem to be falling on the same thing, 20 mile an hour outside schools for the safety of children and adults, obviously, taking children to school. So that one I would like to see pushed forward. Councillor Seymour.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm pleased to say that 20 miles an hour near the school in Berwick have been put in, so thank you for that. The other thing is, I meant to mention the EV chargers. Is that put on this, or is that on another list or another pot of money?
No, there's a separate,
Is there a separate
funding
okay.
allocation entirely within the council's meeting.
Because I know we want to put them in, you know, a lot more places throughout the county.
Yeah, I think from memory, there's an overall budget of 400k, and we expect a significant contribution of external funding to come in. So it's using that as leverage through government funding as well to support that ongoing programme.
Very good, thank you.
Chair, could I just come back in terms of the members' small scheme stuff? Because I think it is worthwhile. It is an area that we are, you know, conscious of. And as Robin's highlighted, that team in particular, because they're dealing with all of the highway safety schemes within and improvement schemes, they also do all of the electric vehicle charging points as well at the moment. So there is an incredible workload on them. They do get through a lot, but there's clearly a very big demand on that. We have in recent years increased the number of people in that team. So we've increased both the admin element of that to support the programming of the work and the dealing with responses, as well as the actual traffic engineers. Traffic engineers, it has to be said, aren't that easy to source in terms of, you know, the coming to work for a local authority when there's lots of consultancies and other places where they can work. So that has been a difficulty for us. But what I would also say in terms of the procedural and the process arrangements that Robin's touched on is that one of the key issues is that just the sheer volume of communication that the team receives. And they get lots and lots of requests because people have a perception that there's a speeding problem or there's a safety issue, and it's always that constant, somebody will get killed outside this, it's a real priority in that area. And that deflects them from looking at the actual programme that's already been agreed, because, you know, we want to be responsive and to deal with that. So part of that procedural and process work that we are doing is to basically just tighten up on these are the kind of the hurdles you need to get past in terms of the evidence base to warrant us spending time looking at some of these things, and that to be, for want of a better word, not so much less responsive, but just firmer in terms of there's no point in looking at things unless there's a real strong evidence base to demonstrate that we're deploying resources effectively to something that's actually going to be tangible and have an outcome. So we are going to be taking forward some additional work in terms of papers on both the 20 mile an hour schemes, obviously, to take that and finish that off, but also looking at residence permits, because that's another area that the team gets involved in terms of residence parking permit requests, speed concerns in terms of just general speed concerns and people wanting to reduce speed limits in an area, as well as just that general safety issue in terms of, you know, concerns around some of that safety at work. So we'll be able to basically cut out some of the information and the things they have to deal with that don't really benefit in terms of the final outcome. They don't lead to anything. So it's been more strict in terms of those criteria to be eligible to then take work forward as well. Yeah.
I don't take you notice of the phrase. Yes, indeed. Before I chip in with my £2 worths again, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm sorry, I did forget to mention this. I don't know whether, Robin, you and Paul are aware of the small hamlet called Stamford, which is situated between 4 junctions. The problem there is it's not so bad in the winter, but there's a lot of indecision in the summer where there's cars waiting and nobody knows whether to go or not. And I asked about 2 or 3 years ago if we could have a painted roundabout or something, just to give people some kind of direction. But nothing's ever happened about it. I'm sure it was in my LTPs maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and it wouldn't take a lot of money just to paint a roundabout on the road. But it is a very rural area, and I know that, but it's used quite a lot. People head that way to use the doctor's surgery in Embleton. People are going to Craster that way. It is quite busy. And as I say, maybe okay in the winter, but not in the summer. And also, if you're coming from Embleton, if you want to turn right, you've just got to go for it, because you cannot see what is coming because of the bend. It's okay at night because you can see the lights of other cars, but it is a very dangerous little junction.
Thank you for that. We'll have a look at that. I am aware of the location that you make reference to. Obviously, I don't think we're aware of any. We need to check the accident record in terms of any issues that have actually occurred there, but that's what
I don't
we'll
think there has
prioritise.
been any crashes. Yeah. It's just we're all poised, 2 or 3 cars all.
Sometimes that's good though, because the hesitancy makes people check. So, yeah.
You've mentioned 2 things that I want to take you up on. One is residence parking permits. I've happily paid my extra dividend this year into the council's coffers for my parking permit, but the residents of Holy Island have asked for a residence parking permit scheme across there to alleviate the problems that they have of illegal parking. So is that something that is on your horizon as a priority, or is that something that's just blown in the wind?
Residence parking schemes are very, very, very difficult and complex because people start talking about residence parking schemes to resolve a problem that's not about residence parking. As you mentioned there, it's about illegal parking. So in most of the ones I am now coming across, people are trying to use residence parking schemes to sort a separate problem, and it can be then difficult trying to sort that out. Residence parking schemes are also then judged on the volume of off-street parking that is already available, the volume of available parking. If it's in a residence street on its own, then that's fine. But if you have shops, if you have a community, if you have other people that need to be there, it's very difficult to then introduce a residence parking, because you just are displacing that car parking to other parts that then start having a residence parking problem. So they are quite complex. I'm aware of the Holy Island one, and we'll look into it and report back.
I'll take that one back to you. And the final thing that I'll bring up is EV charging. I didn't realise that it was part of your remit, but I've managed to get a couple of sites secured, and that is going to be a major issue going forward, because I think we're all now going to try and persuade our parishes to get involved and to get some sort of EV charging. So you will see an increased demand for that service.
So just on that issue, we obviously the government's passed legislation that phases out diesel vehicles. So the expectation is everybody's going to be driving around in electric vehicles. The issue fundamentally being there's a lot of residents that don't have access to their own drives, and clearly if you don't have access to your own drive, it's very difficult then to charge a vehicle. So that's, at the moment, our strategy is primarily being about putting in destinations, so in car parks, in other locations, in town centres where people visit, so you don't have that range anxiety. We still continue with that programme of activity, but we're increasingly looking at that on-street provision of EV charges for those people and those communities that don't have their own drives, or not a high proportion of people that have their own drives and their own garages to park the vehicles on, so that people aren't disadvantaged fundamentally in terms of, as that changeover to, as the technology moves on, they're not disadvantaged in that. So that's our strategic approach that we're taking forward. There is a paper that we're going to be bringing forward that just highlights that and gets the sign off on that. But that's the work that the team's doing at the moment in terms of just identifying those locations that are a priority to take forward within that. Yeah, and also, you know, trying to attract as much OZEV funding from government to lever in, so we, over the next, hopefully 5 years, have a really good programme and cover off the whole of the county with that.
So, does anyone else have any points or issues to raise?
Did I mention that I'll get murdered if that would my
You did.
By public request, could you leave Highcliffe to the later part? That's it. We'll now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item 14. Dare anyone say it? Any urgent business? If any, I'm not aware of any. So we'll move on to the final item, and that is date of the next meeting, which is the 24th of March 2022 at 3 p.m.
Anik, I hope.
There has been a request, and it will probably be Anik. That has to be confirmed, but with the easing of restrictions, yes, and the only reason that you're here today and not in Anik is the venue had been booked. Thank you, and that's the end of the meeting.